It was a night that would forever be etched in the annals of Australia's criminal history. The air was thick with an eerie silence, the kind that precedes a storm. Little did anyone know, the storm that was about to break was not one of nature, but of human tragedy. A night of unimaginable tragedy. The kind of tragedy that leaves an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of all who hear of it. It was a night that would shatter the peace of a small community and send shockwaves across the nation. A father's desperate 000 call pierced the silence, his voice thick with panic and despair. The operator on the other end could barely make out his words, but the terror in his voice was unmistakable. It was a call that would set in motion a series of events that no one could have foreseen. He claimed a horrific accident had claimed the lives of his 3 young sons. The words hung in the air, heavy with sorrow. Jai, 10, Tyler, 7, and Bailey, just 2 years old. 3 innocent lives, snuffed out in an instant. The operator's heart sank as she listened, knowing that the lives of these children and their family would never be the same. But as investigators delved deeper into the events of that fateful evening, a sinister truth began to unravel. What initially appeared to be a tragic accident soon revealed itself to be something far more disturbing. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, painting a picture of premeditated horror. This was not a case of misadventure, but a meticulously planned act of cold-blooded murder. The realization sent chills down the spines of those involved in the investigation. How could someone commit such an atrocity, especially against their own children? This is the chilling story of Robert Farquharson, a man driven to the brink who chose to extinguish the lives of his own flesh and blood. A man whose actions would forever be remembered as one of the darkest chapters in Australia's history. On that fateful Father's Day evening in 2005, Robert Farquharson, recently separated from his wife Cindy, was driving his 3 sons, Jai, 10, Tyler, 7, and Bailey, 2, back to their mother's house in Winchelsea, Victoria. The drive was supposed to be a simple one, a routine part of their post-separation arrangement, but this time, the journey would take a tragic turn. The drive was a familiar one, a routine part of their post-separation arrangement. It was a drive that Robert had made countless times before, a drive that should have been uneventful. But on this night, something was different. There was a darkness in Robert's heart, a darkness that would soon manifest in the most horrific way. However, this time the journey would end in an unthinkable tragedy. As the car approached a farm dam, Robert made a fateful decision. He veered off the road and plunged the car into the icy depths of the water. The car sank quickly, trapping the children inside. Their cries for help were drowned out by the cold, dark water. As Farquharson's car plunged into the icy depths of a farm dam, his chilling cries for help echoed through the night. The sound was haunting, a desperate plea for a rescue that would never come. The water was unforgiving, swallowing the car and its occupants in a matter of moments. The emergency services rushed to the scene, their hearts pounding with a mix of hope and dread. They knew that time was of the essence, that every second counted. But as they arrived, the grim reality of the situation began to set in. The car was submerged, and the chances of finding survivors were slim. The car, submerged in the murky water, painted a grim picture. The headlights, still faintly glowing, cast an eerie light on the scene. The water was dark and cold, a stark contrast to the warmth and life that had once filled the car. It was a sight that would haunt the rescuers for years to come. Divers plunged into the dark, their every movement fueled by the desperate hope of finding survivors. They worked tirelessly, their hearts heavy with the weight of their task. But as they searched the wreckage, it became clear that their efforts were in vain. The children were gone, but it was too late. The lifeless bodies of Jai, Tyler, and Bailey were pulled from the wreckage, their innocent lives tragically cut short. The sight of their small, lifeless bodies was a stark reminder of the fragility of life. The rescuers could only look on in sorrow, their hearts breaking for the children and their family. The lifeless bodies of Jai, Tyler, and Bailey were pulled from the wreckage, their innocent lives tragically cut short. The sight was almost too much to bear. The rescuers, hardened by years of experience, found themselves struggling to hold back tears. The loss of these young lives was a blow that would be felt by the entire community. The community was left reeling, grappling with the incomprehensible loss of 3 young lives. The news spread quickly, and soon the entire nation was mourning the loss of Jai, Tyler, and Bailey. The outpouring of grief was overwhelming. a testament to the impact that these young lives had on those around them. As the news of the tragedy spread, a wave of grief and sympathy washed over the nation. People from all walks of life came together to mourn the loss of the three boys. Vigils were held, candles were lit, and prayers were said. The nation was united in its sorrow, and the Farquharson family was enveloped in a sea of support. How could a father, entrusted with the care of his children, be responsible for such a horrific act? The question echoed in the minds of everyone who heard the story. It was a question that seemed to have no answer, a question that only deepened the sense of loss and confusion. But beneath the surface of grief and disbelief, questions lingered. The circumstances surrounding the crash were shrouded in mystery, leaving investigators and the community searching for answers. How could this have happened? What could have driven Robert to commit such an unspeakable act? The circumstances surrounding the crash were shrouded in mystery, leaving investigators and the community searching for answers. Was it a tragic accident? A father's worst nightmare come true? Or was there something more sinister at play, a darkness lurking beneath the surface of a seemingly ordinary family? Was it a tragic accident? A father's worst nightmare come true? The initial report suggested as much, but as the investigation continued, doubts began to surface. The evidence didn't quite add up, and the story that Robert told didn't seem to match the facts. Or was there something more sinister at play? A darkness lurking beneath the surface of a seemingly ordinary family? As investigators dug deeper, they began to uncover a web of lies and deceit. The truth, when it finally came to light, was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. The site of the accident, a remote and desolate dam on a quiet country road, became an instant focal point. The image of the submerged car, a chilling symbol of the tragedy that had unfolded, was seared into the minds of investigators and the public alike. As divers worked tirelessly to recover the bodies of the three young boys, a sense of unease began to settle over the investigation. The details of the crash, pieced together from the wreckage and Farquharson's account, didn't quite add up. The dam itself was relatively shallow, and the car had not been traveling at a high speed. It seemed implausible that a car could so easily veer off the road and plunge into the water, especially given Farquharson's claims that he had blacked out during a coughing fit. The more investigators scrutinized the scene, the more suspicious they became. The evidence pointed not to a tragic accident, but to a deliberate and carefully planned act. Farquharson's behavior in the aftermath of the crash further fueled suspicions. While distraught, his grief seemed superficial, lacking the raw emotion and devastation one would expect from a father who had just lost his children. His account of the events leading up to the crash was inconsistent and riddled with holes, raising red flags for the seasoned detectives. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, a chilling picture emerged, one that painted Robert Farquharson not as a grieving father, but as a cold and calculating killer. The investigation took a dramatic turn when witnesses came forward, casting doubt on Farquharson's version of events. They reported seeing him driving erratically in the moments leading up to the crash, suggesting that he had been in control of the vehicle. The discovery of tire marks on the road, indicating a deliberate turn towards the dam, further solidified the prosecution's theory that this was no accident. The weight of evidence was mounting, pointing towards a deliberate act of filicide, a crime as old as time itself, yet one that continues to shock and horrify. To understand the depths of this tragedy, investigators delved into the lives of Robert and Cindy Farquharson, piecing together the events that led to that fateful night. The couple had been married for several years, their relationship initially filled with love and the joy of welcoming their three sons into the world. However, like many marriages, theirs was not without its challenges. Over time, resentment and bitterness began to fester, driving a wedge between them. By 2005, the marriage had reached its breaking point, and the couple decided to separate. The separation was acrimonious, marked by custody disputes and growing animosity. Robert, in particular, struggled to cope with the breakdown of his marriage and the prospect of limited access to his sons. Friends and family noticed a change in his demeanor, describing him as increasingly withdrawn, angry, and resentful towards Cindy. It was during this tumultuous period that Robert Farquharson allegedly began to formulate his sinister plan. Prosecutors would later argue that he saw his sons as an obstacle in his attempts to move on with his life, a constant reminder of his failed marriage. He resented Cindy for what he perceived as her control over his life and the boys, and he became consumed by a desire for revenge. In his twisted mind, the only way to hurt Cindy was to take away what she held most dear, her children. While there was no history of physical abuse, the escalating bitterness and resentment within the family painted a troubling picture. Robert's actions, seen through the lens of the separation and his growing anger towards his estranged wife, took on a sinister new meaning. The once loving father was now suspected of harboring dark thoughts, his love for his sons warped into a dangerous obsession. The lines between love, anger, and revenge had become blurred, culminating in an act of unimaginable cruelty.